You may already be very familiar with Excel and what you can do with it, but if not, I want to go over just a few basic things before we get started. So Excel is a spreadsheet. It consists of columns and rows. The columns are denoted by letters and the rows by numbers. And within the table, there are various cells, and the cells can be identified by the column letter and row number. So, and that would be up here in our address box. The cell B3 is this cell here, column B, row 3. So just to get started, we're going to look at numbers and formatting today. So when I type this up here, what I've typed is wider than the actual cell. One thing I can do to kind of make things look nice is select this cell here that actually contains the word numbers and formats. Drag my mouse across to select more than one cell. I've selected cells A1, B1, and C1. Under my home menu, I can now merge these cells together, and I've got a nice label then for my spreadsheet. And again, today's all about making things look nice. Type in a few words here. Some of the different formats we have is bold, italic, scientific notation, percent notation, currency, and accounting are two slightly different ways to display money in Excel, and date. That's the other one I wanted to look at. And we can throw a few numbers in here. 22, negative 63.00073. Percent, have a 0.12, 135.0468. Let's try a negative number. We'll see how that looks. And 1/6 there. Okay, so most of the numbers as I typed them in, what I typed is what showed up. What's interesting here with the date, what I actually typed in was 1/6, and it made the assumption 1/6 year 2014. So what I typed was actually changed as I typed it into Excel. If that's not what I intended, I can go into the home menu and I can change the formatting on this cell. I can just change it to general, and I get a very interesting thing. What I originally typed was 1/6. Excel formatted that as a date, and now as I convert it back into a number, it's reading that number as a converted date. So you will get some strange effects here. Probably the safest thing to do at this point is you go ahead, delete that, what I typed into that cell, check my formatting, and I seem to have messed that up. Let's type in a number here and see if it's taking it correctly. There, 1/6 is 0.16 repeating. It's now typed it in as 0.17. Okay, so let's go ahead. A couple things that are going on with this table. Notice the word scientific notation. When I originally typed it in, it just lapped over into the next cell. But as soon as I put a number into the adjoining cell, this entry here kind of got half hidden. So one thing I can do under my home menu is something called wrap text. And that will essentially put a return in at a convenient notation and just change the height of the cell so I can see the entire data that I typed in, scientific notation. Now as far as our table looks, it gets a little bit awkward because the one row 7, is much wider, much taller now than the other rows in this table that I'm trying to format. So one thing we can do there, if we click on the number 5, that selects the entire row. And if I click and drag, I can select all the rows here in my table. And if I adjust the height of one of these cells, all of the selected rows will now be adjusted to have the same height. If I click on C up here, that grabs column C, and I can adjust the width here, and that way I can see the entire word accounting now. So that gets a nice uniform look to my table. Let's see, what else can we do here? Let's put a box around the table. Let's grab these under the home menu. This option right here brings up various border options. And let's try a thick box border. Click over here to make that a little easier to see. And I've got a border. Other things we can do, again, just selecting and dragging to grab all those cells. I can center my data left to right, and I can center things top to bottom. Okay, let's see. How about up here? Let's type in formatted cells. I want this to be a title, so I'm going to go ahead, click and drag to select cells C4 and D4. Go to Home, Merge and Center, and I've got a nice title there. And let's go ahead and add a border to that. Okay, so we've got things looking pretty. Let's go ahead and play around with some of the formats. So the number 22 here, I want to switch that to bold. And if I click here on the Home tab, I've got a shortcut for bold. And now 22 is bolded. The thing to remember in Excel, there's usually 5 different ways to do everything. So you may have other shortcuts, and I'll be showing you various ones too. We'll change around a little bit here. So let me click on the -63. I'm going to italicize it. That's under my home menu. And again, I've got a shortcut, but again, just to show you the second way to do this, if I click on font, I can bring up another menu. And let's see, I've got italic here. Whoops. Has an option. And this is a place where I can change the font, strike through, superscripts, subscripts, all sorts of things. And I'll click on OK here. And now the number -63 is italicized. Okay, this next number here, scientific notation. Actually, before I change this to scientific notation, let me show you something else in Excel. Under the number menu here, I've got 2 little icons with arrows and decimal places. This one will increase decimal places. This one will decrease decimal places that are being displayed. So if I click this one, my .0073 has now been changed so that it only displays .007. But the number itself in the cell is actually still .0073. It's just the display that's changed. So I'm just displaying fewer decimal places. And if I go back to Home and I increase the decimal places, the number is still there. So the actual value in the cell didn't change, just how it's being displayed. Now I want to take this number and change it to scientific notation. So I can bring up my numbers. Let's see. One way to do this is simply going down to here, drop-down menu, and clicking on Scientific. So 7.30E-04 is how Excel displays the number 7.3 times 10 to the -4. Percent notation. I've got a shortcut button here in Excel. I'll change it to a percent. Let me undo that with this button here. I can also, in the drop-down menu, let's say I've got a percentage here. I've got a percentage with 2 decimal places, and undo. And then I can also open up the number format here, go to percentage, and I can specify how many decimal places I can increase or decrease that. Okay, so again, multiple ways to display numbers, multiple ways to do the same thing. So you want to play around quite a bit with the different menus in Excel so you get comfortable with it. Okay, my next two cells are currency and accounting. So when I change something to currency format, let's see, I think there is a shortcut here. Currency. It's rounded it to 2 decimal places. That's customary when working with money, to round to 2 decimal places, the nearest penny. The accounting option is also essentially a money format. Slightly different. When in accounting mode, negative numbers are displayed with parentheses. That's customary in accounting. And you get a slightly different placement of the dollar sign between the currency mode and the accounting mode. So I think it just depends on what discipline you're in and what field you're interested in, which format is more appropriate. And again, if we open up the whole number menu, under accounting, we can specify decimal places, we can specify different symbols, depending on what type of currency we're working with. And let's keep that dollars. If this one was in the accounting notation, I'd get a couple options. Sorry, currency notation. I can display it as a negative number, or I can display negative numbers in red, or with the parentheses to demonstrate that it's negative, or be in both red and with parentheses to be negative. Yeah, let me cancel that one. Okay, then the date. Again, this one's a little strange in Excel. So be careful if you want to be typing in dates, how you want to do it. And I think the safest thing to do if you want something to be a date is just go ahead, change the format first before you type in the date. And then get the answer to display it the way you want to and not have it change it to strange numbers because it's trying to interpret a fraction as a date when you want it to be a fraction. And let's change that to 1/6/2014. Okay. Let's see, what else can we do? Again, just to make things look pretty, if we select a cell, we can go into the home menu. We have options to change colors. So we can give it a bright, bold title to make things pop out. Let's see. Well, I think that's enough to get you started. Again, play around in Excel. Open up as many menus as you can. And keep in mind, there are multiple ways to do things. Oh, one other thing, really important, the undo button. You don't want to be afraid to try anything. If you do something and something strange happens, this button up here will undo your last changes. And we can back up quite a ways, and then this button right next to it will redo those changes. Okay, so don't be afraid to try something because you can always undo it.